Hello from Stanford University Press. I'm Margo Irvin, Acquisitions Editor for our history list here at SUP. And as we kick off the spring conference season, I want to celebrate all the books that have been coming out over this past very challenging year. And I hope so much that in the not too distant future, we'll be able to convene in person again. But in lieu of in-person meetings, I wanted to take this opportunity to just talk a little bit about what I'm looking for the US history list here at Stanford, as well as just give a couple of quick pointers about taking the first steps in connecting with a university press editor about your project in the interest of finding a home for your book that is really going to be the right fit. So I will say, lists change over time based on different editor styles and really in the interest of our anticipating and supporting new directions that are going to be pushing the field forward. So Stanford's list is no exception. And at the moment, I would say our list includes a mix of areas where we've long had a presence and have a strong backlist, as well as some areas that are newer for us. So for instance, we have a very long running series in Asian American studies, and this is an area that we absolutely continue to prioritize. I just want to acknowledge how crucial I personally feel it is to be supporting historical work that helps us contextualize the legacy of anti-Asian racism that this country needs to contend with. This has obviously been crystallized recently in these horrible instances of anti-Asian violence in Atlanta and elsewhere. And I think we need to admit that this is not a new development, but really is deeply embedded in the history of this country. And I would say, particularly the history of California and the American West. And I welcome proposals in Asian American studies broadly construed, both those that are situated in the American West, but also in other Asian American communities throughout the US, and also projects that are taking a more kind of transnational view, looking at transnational exchanges, migration, diaspora, the Pacific world more broadly. So as I alluded to before, one of the areas that I'm also looking to build the list, and that is a newer area for us, I would say, is the history of California and the American West, particularly the history of science and technology, the history of computing and information, I think, especially with our proximity to Silicon Valley here at Stanford. And also looking at the history of the military industrial complex in Western states, the relationship between science and technology and resource extraction, infrastructure, the environment, labor, looking at these issues in the 20th century, but also, in the Gilded Age and Progressive Era and earlier. Alongside those topics, I'm interested in projects that are looking at migration, especially from the Pacific and Latin America. This is sort of alongside our very strong lists in Asian history and Latin American history. So I think projects that dialogue with those fields would be very much at home at Stanford. Closely related to that, I'm interested in projects that are taking a look at US imperialism and especially US empire in the Pacific. We have a series in international Cold War history that we run in collaboration with the Woodrow Wilson Center. And so I'm very interested in projects on global Cold War history and more broadly speaking, the history of American foreign relations and diplomatic history. I'm also excited to be building up a new strand in the history of medicine and public health. And I'm particularly interested in projects that are looking at, how public health policies intersect with issues of race, gender, and sexuality. If you're watching this and you're not a US historian, I also acquire in European history and Jewish studies, and I'm very happy to field inquiries from scholars working in various areas who want to kind of just bounce around ideas. So I will turn to just talking a little bit about some things to keep in mind when you're initially approaching an editor. And I will say, there's no single right time or way for an author to engage with a press. Whether you have questions about putting together a proposal, or if you're at the point where you have a full manuscript that is, ready to go out for review next week, I welcome you getting in touch. And, I do love to bounce around ideas at a preliminary stage, but your project is going to kind of more officially enter into my workflow once you have a full proposal for the book. And that's in part because that really says to me that you've done the thinking about what you hope to accomplish the book, and importantly, what audiences you are aiming to reach. So I completely understand that a proposal is a snapshot at a moment in time, and there are things about the project that may change as you receive feedback from colleagues and peers more informally, as you continue working and developing your ideas, and as you go through a formal peer review process. So, the proposal lets me know what your own goals are for the book. And in your initial approach, you should absolutely feel free to attach that proposal. Your introductory email works for me really well if you can include just a few sentences about you and no more than a paragraph or two that just outlines the topic and the stakes of the project. So the main thing I want to see at an early stage is the proposal. If you have sample chapters, feel free to send those along as well. If I'm interested in pursuing the project, I will ask to see some sample material. It's less useful to me to see, a journal article based on the topic or an unrevised dissertation chapter. I really want to see how you're approaching this in book form, and most importantly, whether your goals for the book in terms of the audience that you hope to reach, whether that aligns with the way that you are presenting the information in terms of your writing style and also the amount of knowledge that you're presupposing on behalf of the reader. So with that in mind, I would love to talk to folks about their projects at any stage. And for the month of April, I'm holding virtual office hours, which you can schedule via the Calendly link below. But feel free to contact me at any time via email, and I welcome the opportunity to discuss your work and whether it may be a fit for us here at SUP. Thank you, and stay well.